I wiped the last crystal shot glass and set it on the sideboard shelf next to the others. It was my mother-in-law's, and in the 40 years I'd lived with Edgar, we'd only brought it out on special occasions. Today was my 70th birthday. The house smelled of roast turkey and apple pie. I got up at 5:30 in the morning to get everything done. The turkey had been in the oven for the third hour. The mashed potatoes were waiting in the pot, and the green salad with nuts was chilling in the refrigerator. Ruth always said my salad with walnuts and cranberries was her favorite dish. I spread the white tablecloth on the dining room table in the living room. We usually ate in the kitchen, but for family gatherings, I always set it in the great room. The table seemed huge after Edgar left 3 years ago. We used to seat 6 of us, me, my husband, Ruth, and Lionel, and granddaughter Ivy. Now there were 5 of us, but the table still looked spacious. I pulled the china plates with the blue roses from the sideboard. Edgar had bought this set for our silver wedding. Ruth had said they were too old-fashioned, but I'd kept them anyway. Now my daughter sometimes remarked that vintage things were back in fashion. On the mantel were pictures in silver frames. Ruth in her graduation dress, so young and serious. A picture of us together at her wedding 18 years ago. Me in a beige suit, her in a cream dress, Lionel smiling awkwardly at the camera. Ivy at different ages, an infant in Grandpa Edgar's arms, a schoolgirl with a bouquet for September 1st, a student in a university t-shirt. I corrected a picture from last year of Ruth and me sitting in my garden. She came for my birthday and stayed the weekend. We talked about her work at the school, how difficult it had become with kids who didn't want to learn history. Ruth complained that the principal required too many reports, and her salary didn't cover the cost of a new car. She didn't seem particularly happy that day. Lionel was constantly checking his phone. Ivy was bored without internet, which was slow at my place, but they had arrived, and that was what mattered. I opened the buffet and counted the cutlery. There were enough salad forks, dessert spoons too. I was always worried that something would be missing or dirty. Edgar laughed at my preparations, saying I was throwing a reception for the Queen, not a family dinner. But I wanted everything to be perfect, especially tonight. 70 years is a serious date. I'd been thinking about this day for weeks now, planning the menu, buying groceries, even going to Dolores' hair salon on Main Street. She'd styled my hair and tinted my gray hair a little. In the bedroom on the bed was my best dress, a dark blue dress with a small silver pattern. I'd bought it last year when Ruth had insisted we go to the mall in Dover. It had seemed too dressy for everyday life, but the saleswoman had said it looked great on me. I went back to the kitchen and checked on the turkey. The skin was browned to a golden color, and there was a delicious smell coming from the oven. Edgar always said I was a better cook than his mother, even though she was considered an excellent hostess. Ruth praised my cooking, too, though she added that she didn't have time for such elaborate dishes. I glanced at my watch. It was 3:30. The guests were due at 4. I still had time to shower, dress, and slice bread. I'd baked it last night, a plain white loaf and the rye and caraway bread Lionel liked. On the refrigerator hung a postcard from Ivy that she'd sent a week ago. It had a picture of a funny cat in a holiday hat, and inside it said, "To Grandma Clemmy with love. Can't wait to see and taste your famous pie." Ivy was always an attentive girl. Ruth promised to come too when I called her last week. She said she might be late, though. Lionel had something to do at work. But she'll come. Of course she'll come. It's my 70th birthday. I took the ice cream out of the freezer and put it in the fridge to thaw a little. Vanilla, like Ivy liked, and chocolate for Lionel. Ruth usually refused dessert, but I made her favorite apple cinnamon pie anyway. The house was quiet and peaceful. A light rain drizzled outside the window, and the leaves on the maple tree in the front yard had turned yellow. Soon it would be October, and then winter. It was good that the family would get together today. Since Edgar's death, gatherings like this have become especially important to me. I glanced at my reflection in the mirror over the sink. My face was a little tired but satisfied. My gray hair was neatly styled, and there was a slight blush on my cheeks from working at the stove. Not too bad for a 70-year-old woman. Edgar always said I looked good for my age. The hallway phone rang. I picked it up, hoping to hear Ruth's voice. "Hello?" I said, trying not to show my excitement. "Clemmy, darling, happy birthday," came the cheerful voice of Vera Ellsworth from next door. "How are you? Are you getting ready for the party?" "Thank you, Vera," I smiled. "Yes, everything is almost ready. The family will be here soon." "That's great, and I baked you cookies with oatmeal as you like. I'll bring them over later, okay?" "Sure, come on in. You're welcome." I hung up the phone and went back into the kitchen. The clock read 20 past 4. Ruth and her family were supposed to arrive at 4, but they might be late. Last year, they were a half-hour late because of traffic. I took the turkey out of the oven and put it on a large platter. The skin was golden brown, and the smell wafted throughout the house. The bird was just right. I covered it with foil to keep it warm and began to heat up the mashed potatoes. Everything in the living room was ready for the guests. The white tablecloth without a single crease, crystal glasses glistened in the light of the chandelier. Silverware was strictly according to etiquette. Candles in brass candlesticks burned on the mantel, the same ones Edgar had given me for our first anniversary. I looked at the clock again. 4:45. We must have gotten caught in traffic, or Lionel must have gotten stuck at work. Ivy could be late at the university. They were in session. "It's okay, I'll wait." I took out my phone and checked my messages. Nothing. No notifications about traffic or delays. I dialed Ruth's number, but all I heard were long beeps. Apparently she was driving and couldn't answer. 5:30. I walked around the house, adjusting items that were already impeccably arranged. I moved the vase of flowers a few centimeters to the left, turned the napkin over by my appliance, checked to see if the candles were out. The house was silent, broken only by the ticking of the old clock in the hallway. Edgar had bought it at an auction years ago, and it had been ticking away for a quarter of a century. Tick-tock, tick-tock, tick-tock. Seconds turned into minutes, minutes into hours. 5 p.m. I dialed my daughter's number again. No answer again. I tried Lionel, same result. Ivy's cell phone was disconnected. That's odd. Ruth usually gave me a heads up if she was going to be late. She'd call or text. This one was completely silent. I went back to the kitchen and looked under the foil. The turkey had cooled a bit, but still looked appetizing. The mashed potatoes were holding their temperature too, but the salad no longer seemed as fresh as it had an hour ago. "Something serious must have happened," I said aloud, trying to reassure myself. "An accident on the road or car trouble." But there was an uneasiness brewing inside. Not panic, but a cold, unpleasant kind of anxiety. Like I already knew the truth, but I didn't want to believe it. 6:30. It was starting to get dusk outside the window, and the rain was getting heavier. I turned on the light in the living room and looked at the table set. 5 dishes, 5 glasses, 5 napkins, and I'm sitting alone in an empty house. The doorbell rang. My heart jumped. Finally! I quickly went into the hallway and opened the door. On the threshold stood Vera with a small box in her hands. My neighbor was 3 years younger than me, but she looked older, gray hair gathered in a simple bundle, a tired face without makeup, a worn coat. "Hi, honey," she said, holding out a box. "Here are your cookies. Where's the birthday girl?" Not very festive at all. "Thank you for the cookies," I smiled, accepting the box. "And I'm waiting for my family. They're running a little late." Vera squinted at my face. "Delayed? For how long?" "An hour or so. Maybe something happened on the road." "Did you call them?" "I did. No answer. They must be on their way." Vera nodded, but I could see the doubt in her eyes. Listen, can I come in? She asked. To see how you're celebrating your 70th birthday. I couldn't say no. Faith was the only person in Dagsboro I'd really connected with since Edgar died. Sure, come on in. We walked into the living room, and Vera whistled when she saw the table set. Oh my God, Clemmy, you've made a feast for half Dagsboro. How hard have you been working? I've been at it since this morning, I admitted. I wanted everything to be perfect. Vera walked around the table, looking at the dishes under the foil and foil. Turkey, mashed potatoes, salad, pie. There's enough food for 10 people. How many of you are coming? 4. Ruth, Lionel, Ivy, and me. I see. Vera sat down on the edge of the couch. What time did they say they'd be here? 4 o'clock. Vera looked at her watch. It was almost 6. Clemmy, darling, are you sure they remembered your birthday? The question sounded very careful, but I flinched anyway. Of course they do. We talked about it last week. Ruth had suggested that we celebrate at home instead of at a restaurant. Of course, Vera agreed quickly. I just thought, maybe they're in some kind of trouble. A car breakdown, an illness. Yes, probably. I nodded, but there was no confidence in my voice. We were silent for a few minutes. Vera was looking at the pictures on the mantel, and I was trying to think of a reasonable explanation for the family's delay. Why don't I put the kettle on? Vera suggested. We'll have tea with my cookies, and when yours arrive, they'll join us. Good idea. We went into the kitchen, and Vera gasped when she saw the amount of food we had prepared. Clemmy, you could feed 100 people, she exclaimed. How much time did you spend? I got up at 5:30 in the morning, I said, putting the kettle on the stove. I wanted to do everything properly. Vera opened the box of cookies. They smelled of oats and cinnamon, just like my mother used to bake them when I was a child. You know, Vera said, settling herself at the kitchen table, after Ronald died, I used to make holiday dinners too. Out of habit, I'd set the table for 2, and then I'd sit alone and wonder what it was all for. Ronald Ellsworth died 5 years ago of a heart attack. Vera took the loss hard. They had lived together for 38 years. My situation is different, I objected. The family is just delayed. Of course, darling, that's not what I meant. But I sensed that Vera was thinking about something else, the same thing that was beginning to creep into my head. The kettle was boiling. I made tea and poured it into cups. We sat down at the small kitchen table where I usually had breakfast alone. Tell me about Ruth, Vera asked, taking a bite of her cookie. How is she doing? She works at the school, teaching history. She complains about the children, about the principal, about the small salary. What about her family? Lionel works as a computer programmer. He makes good money, but he's always busy. Ivy's a sophomore at university. Do you see them often? I've been thinking, when was the last time we had a family get-together? My last birthday. Ruth came a couple of times after that, at Easter and in the summer with Ivy. Not very often, I admitted. Everyone has their own things to do. I understand, Vera nodded. Young people are so busy these days. We finished our tea in silence. It was dark outside the window, the rain drumming on the glass. The clock in the hallway struck 7. Clemmy, Vera said cautiously, maybe we should call them again. I took out my cell phone and dialed Ruth's number. There was a long dial tone, then an answering machine. Ruth, it's Mom, I said into the receiver. We're waiting for you. Please call. I tried Lionel and Ivy. Same result. That's strange, I muttered. Usually someone answers. Vera stood up and went to the window. What if we looked on the internet? She suggested. Maybe there really is an accident or a traffic jam on the road. I didn't know how to use the internet as well as young people, but I knew the basics. I turned on Edgar's old computer and opened the traffic website. No major accidents, I said, looking at the map. A little congestion, but not critical. Faith sat down next to me and put her hand on my shoulder. Clemmy, honey, maybe they just forgot? The word forgot hung in the air like a sentence. It can't be, I whispered. We had a deal. People sometimes forget even important things, Vera said softly. It doesn't mean they don't love you, but I knew it wasn't just forgetfulness. 70-somethings don't forget, especially when your mother herself has reminded you of it several times. We went back into the living room and sat down on the couch. The set table looked incongruous in the empty room. The candles were burning out, wax dripping onto the candlesticks. Shall we eat? Vera suggested. Otherwise, all the food will be wasted. I nodded. I had no appetite, but Vera was right. The food was spoiling. We served ourselves a plate. The turkey was dry. The mashed potatoes were cold. The salad was wilted. The meal I'd prepared with such love had turned into an ordinary dinner for two single women. It's good, Vera said, but I could see that she was eating through her teeth. At 8 p.m., my phone finally rang. I grabbed it so fast I almost dropped it. Ruth? Mom, hi. My daughter's voice sounded strange. It sounded too cheerful and tense at the same time. How are you? Ruth, where are you? We've been waiting for you for 4 hours. The table's set. The food's getting cold. Oh, yes, your birthday. There was no remorse in her voice. Look, Mom, we can't make it. My heart sank. What do you mean you can't come? What happened? An accident? Is someone sick? No, it's fine. We just, flew away. Flew away? Flew where? Mexico, Cancun. Lionel found a hot deal. A very good deal. We couldn't pass up the opportunity. I was silent, unable to believe what I was hearing. Vera, who was sitting next to me, was staring intensely at my face. Mom, are you there? I'm here, I said softly. Ruth, today is my 70th birthday. 70th. We had a deal. Yes, I remember. But you see, you don't get a tour like this every day. You can celebrate your birthday later. Later? My voice was shaking, but not from tears, but from something else. It was the cold that was spreading in my chest. Yeah, when we get back, we'll celebrate in a week, or next weekend. Ruth, I've been preparing for this day for weeks. I got up at 4:30 in the morning, cooked your favorite turkey, baked apple pie. Mom, don't be such a baby. It's just a date on the calendar. It's just a date on the calendar. 70 years of life is just a date. Why didn't you tell me this beforehand? I asked, trying to stay calm. Why would I? There was nothing to change anyway. The plane was leaving in the morning, and we had already bought the tickets. So, yesterday, when I called you and asked you what time you were coming, you already knew that you were leaving. Well, I did, but I didn't want to upset you beforehand. I didn't want to upset you beforehand. It's better to be upset at the last moment when you can't change anything. Ruth, I said very quietly, does Ivy know too? Of course she does. We're going as a family. Ivy knew. My granddaughter, who sent postcards and wrote about her impatience to taste the pie, knew they weren't coming, and she didn't say a word. Mom, don't make a tragedy of it, Ruth continued. We'll have a good vacation and come back in high spirits, and you should relax too. You're too caught up in these family gatherings. Obsessed with family gatherings? I said it again. Yeah, you're always cooking, serving, fussing. And then you get upset if someone's late or doesn't show up. It's time you got used to people having a life. Their own lives. They have a life, and I guess I don't. Ruth, it's my birthday. 70th birthday. Mom, frankly, we're tired. We need a break from work, from problems, from, well, everything. Does that include me? Pause. A long, eloquent pause. Mom, don't be silly. But I get it. That pause was everything. the whole truth about how my daughter felt about me. Okay, I said calmly. Rest. That's great. Don't be mad, Mom. We'll be back soon and we'll catch up. Yeah, we will. Well, I'll be off. It's really beautiful here, by the way. The ocean, the palm trees, the sun. It's so nice. It's nice. While I sit in an empty house with cold food, my daughter enjoys the sun and the ocean. Goodbye, Ruth. Bye, Mom. I put the phone down on the table and looked at Vera. The neighbor sat stone-faced. What did she say? Vera asked quietly. That they flew to Mexico. Lionel had found a favorable tour, and they couldn't miss the opportunity. Vera was silent, digesting the information. And when did they find out about this tour? Apparently as early as yesterday, maybe even earlier. Ruth says she didn't want to upset me beforehand. I see. Vera stood up and paced the room. So she knew she wasn't coming, but she let you get ready? Standing at the stove all day, setting the table, waiting? Yeah. What did she say about her birthday? That it was just a date on the calendar, and that we'd celebrate later. Vera stopped and looked at me. Clemmy, darling, don't you think that's, cruel? Cruel? Yes, that was the word for her daughter's behavior. Not careless, not inconsiderate, cruel. I guess, I admitted. How do you feel? I wondered. How did I feel? Surprisingly, there were no tears. There was no desire to sob or to call Ruth back with reproaches. There was something else. It's strange, I said. I'm not crying. I thought I was going to cry, but I'm not. It's just cold inside. It's a normal reaction to betrayal, Vera said softly. First shock, then anger. I'm not angry. I'm disappointed. Or maybe you just haven't realized it yet. I stood up and walked over to the set table. 5 dishes, 5 napkins, 5 glasses. But only one guest had come, the neighbor Vera, who took pity on the lonely old woman. You know, Vera, I said, putting away the extra utensils, Ruth has always been selfish, even as a child. Tell me about it. Vera helped me fold the napkins. I remember she was about 8 years old. I was sick with the flu and had a high fever. I asked her to bring me some water, and she said, Mom, I'm watching cartoons. Go by yourself. Children can be inattentive, Vera said cautiously. Yes, but it wasn't childish inattention. It was indifference. By the time she was 11, she knew perfectly well that her mother was sick and needed help. But her own wishes were more important. We moved the dishes into the kitchen. I started cleaning up the leftovers, and Vera helped. And then? She asked. And then it was business as usual. At school, she needed money for excursions, clubs, tutors. Edgar and I denied ourselves everything to give her a good education. And when she got to university, she said we weren't supporting her enough. What do you mean? She didn't think we gave her enough money? She'd seen how her classmates from rich families lived, and she thought we should give her the same. I put the turkey in the fridge. The bird I'd been cooking since 5 in the morning, the one my daughter had been looking forward to, would now be my breakfast for the rest of the week. When did she get married? Vera continued to ask. Edgar and I helped them with the down payment on the house. We gave them almost all of our savings. Ruth said it was our duty to help the children get back on their feet. And how did she make it sound? As a matter of course, not as something to be appreciated, but as a matter of course, like parents have a duty to help their children. Vera shook her head. And then what happened? Then Ivy was born. I was happy a granddaughter at last. Ruth was working and I had to babysit. I didn't mind. I loved it. But when Ivy started kindergarten, Ruth mentioned in passing that I could pay extra for a nanny, since she's such a caring grandmother. So you were babysitting your granddaughter for free, and she demanded money? Not directly. She hinted. She said nannies were expensive, that the family budget was struggling, that it would be nice to have a safety net. I washed the last plate and put it in the dryer. The kitchen looked like there was no holiday planned. When did Edgar die? It was a question I'd been waiting for, and dreaded it. When Edgar died, Ruth's main concern was the inheritance, I said quietly. Not how I would live alone, not how I would cope with my grief. It was that the house and the savings would go to me. Did she just say that? Not directly, but 2 weeks after the funeral, she asked me if I'd made a will. She said that at my age it was important to have everything planned out in advance. Vera whistled. At my age, I was 67 at the time and quite healthy. And what did you say? That it was too early to think about it. And she said, Mom, you have to be realistic. Anything can happen. And she added that Ivy was about to go to university and education was expensive. We went into the living room and sat on the couch. The room seemed too big and empty. Clemmy, haven't you ever wanted to tell her the truth about how you feel? I wanted to, but every time I thought, what if I'm wrong? What if she just doesn't know how to express her feelings? Maybe I'm just too sensitive. And now, after today, I looked at the pictures on the mantel. Ruth as a child, at the prom, at her wedding. She was smiling in all of them, but her eyes were still cold. Now I know I wasn't wrong, I said. My daughter sees me as a burden, a hindrance to her happy life. What are you going to do about it? That's a good question. What am I going to do? Keep putting up with it? Pretend like nothing happened? Wait for Ruth to need money again? Or a free nanny for future grandchildren? I don't know yet, I answered honestly. Would you like some advice? I nodded. Live for yourself. You have many years ahead of you, and you have the right to be happy. Live for yourself. What a strange notion for a mother who'd lived for her family for 45 years. It's easy to say, I sighed. Easy, Vera agreed. But it's worth a try. We talked some more, then Vera went home. I was left alone in an empty house with burned-out candles and the remains of a festive dinner. 70 years. Most of my life had been lived, but I thought for the first time that the rest of it might be worth living differently. I sat in the silence of the empty living room and reminisced. It's strange how clearly details of the past come through when the present is crumbling. Maybe the brain is trying to find explanations, to figure out where the fork in the road was that made everything go wrong. Ruth was born on a cold February morning in 1978. It was a difficult labor, but when the doctor placed the wrinkled red lump on my chest, I thought it was the most beautiful moment of my life. Edgar stood beside me and cried with happiness. What a beauty, he whispered, gently touching the tiny hand. Just like her mother, I thought Ruth was special, not because she was my first child, but because she was really different from other children. She started talking very early, learned to read early, asked difficult questions. The kindergarten teachers said she was capable, but a little aloof. It's as if she's watching the other children from the sidelines. Marta, a senior teacher, explained to me. She doesn't participate in games, doesn't make friends. She prefers to be alone. I wrote it off as a character trait. So, what if she's introverted? Lots of smart kids are like that. But gradually, I began to notice other oddities. When she was 5, Ruth fell off her bike and shattered her knee. I ran to her, ready to comfort and pity her, but she looked at the blood with a kind of cold curiosity. Does it hurt? I asked, tending to the wound. Not very much, she answered indifferently. Why is the blood red? No tears, no whimsy, just scientific interest. At the time, I thought I had a little scientist growing up. Now I realize it was something else. Ruth did well in school, but teachers complained about her behavior. Not bullying or disobedience, but indifference to her classmates. Ruth is a very clever girl. said Mrs. Holmes, the class teacher, but she has no friendship at all. When other children cry or get upset, she just turns away. Maybe she's shy, I speculated. No, Mrs. Rickson. She's not shy. She's just not interested in other people's problems. I tried to teach my daughter empathy. I explained how important it was to help friends, to care for loved ones, to be sensitive to other people's feelings. Ruth listened patiently and nodded, but her eyes were empty. Of course, Mother, she said. I understand, but nothing changed. When her classmate Timmy got sick and the whole class made cards for him, Ruth refused to participate. Why? She asked. A card won't cure him, but it would make him feel good to know his friends thought of him. We're not friends. We're just in the same class. In high school, the first serious demands came. Ruth needed new jeans like her classmates, then expensive sneakers, then a cell phone. But everyone has one, she explained when I objected to another purchase. We don't have that big of a budget, honey. Why not? Ruth looked at me with genuine bewilderment. Daddy works, you work, we should have enough money. I tried to explain about the house loan, the utility bills, the need to save for her future education. But Ruth listened with the look of someone being told an uninteresting story. All right, she finally said. Then I'll ask Aunt Carol. Aunt Carol was Edgar's sister, childless and well-to-do. She was very fond of her niece and never refused a gift. Ruth quickly realized this and learned to manipulate her aunt's love. Why do you ask Aunt Carol? I asked. We said we'd buy you jeans for your next paycheck. Why wait? Aunt Carol doesn't care about money, she offered. But it's not right. Why is it wrong? She wants to make me happy. I want the jeans. Good for everyone. It's ironclad logic, but cold. Ruth didn't understand why I was upset. It was just a way for her to get what she wanted. When it was time to go to university, a new phase of demands began. Ruth chose an expensive private college in another state. But the tuition there is 3 times as high as at the local university, Edgar argued. But the degree is more prestigious, Ruth replied. Don't you want your daughter to have a good education? Edgar and I looked at each other. Of course we did. We always wanted the best for our daughter. We'll think about it, I said. There's not much to think about, Ruth said. We have to get the papers in by March 1st. Time was running out. In the end, we got a loan, a big one, for many years. We had to give up our vacations, our new car, the renovation of the house, but Ruth got her prestigious education. At university, she called once a week. The conversations were short and dry. How's it going? I asked. Fine. How's school? Good. Why don't you come up this weekend? No time. I've got a lot of classes. But when she needed money for books, for dorms, for student activities, Ruth would call, and the conversation would get a lot more detailed. Mom, here's the situation, she began in a cordial tone. We need to buy some extra materials for our art history course. The books are very expensive, but we can't do without them. Or, Mom, our group is planning an educational trip to Europe. It's a unique opportunity for my development, but we need to pay extra for visa and insurance. Every time I asked myself, what if I say no? But I never dared to try. After university, Ruth returned home. There were no jobs in her specialty and no money for a place of her own. She moved into her old room and acted like a lodger, not a daughter. Mom, what's for dinner? She asked, not offering to help with the cooking. Mom, I'm out of shampoo, she informed me, expecting me to buy a new one. Mom, please wash my clothes, she asked, not even apologizing for the request. A year later, she met Lionel. The young programmer seemed like a nice guy. Quiet, polite, hardworking. He was obviously in love with Ruth and would do anything for her. At last, my daughter had found a decent man, Edgar said. I liked Lionel too, but it was the way Ruth treated him that bothered me. She was sweet and attentive when she needed something, and cold when everything went according to her plan. The wedding was expensive. Ruth wanted a real celebration, not a modest ceremony for the poor. Edgar and I took out another loan. A daughter's wedding is a once-in-a-lifetime experience, my husband told himself as he signed the papers at the bank. Sure, Dad, Ruth agreed, and I want you to be proud of me. After the wedding, the newlyweds rented an apartment, but 6 months later they announced plans to buy a house. Renting is a waste of money, Ruth explained. It's better to pay the mortgage and eventually get a property. Makes sense, but they didn't have the money for a down payment. We'd ask Lionel's parents, Ruth said, but they're having a hard time. His father's sick, and it's taking a lot of money for treatment. The implication was clear. We, unlike Lionel's parents, have no problems, and we should help. How much do you need? Edgar asked. $30,000, Ruth answered without a trace of embarrassment. $30,000, almost all of our savings, the money we've been saving for our old age. That's a lot of money, I said cautiously. Mom, it's an investment in our future, Ruth said. And that means your grandchildren's future. We didn't have grandchildren yet, but the prospect was tempting, so we gave them the money, all $30,000. Ruth was happy and grateful until she got the keys to the house. Thank you for helping us get back on our feet, she said at the housewarming party. It's your duty as a parent, parental duty, not help worth appreciating, but duty. Ivy was born 2 years later. I was over the moon, a granddaughter at last. A tiny, defenseless, adorable little girl with gray eyes and fluffy hair. Ruth took 3 months maternity leave and then announced she was going back to work. Mom, you like taking care of children, don't you? She asked me in passing. Why don't you babysit Ivy until we find a nanny? Of course I liked it. I couldn't get enough of my granddaughter, feeding her, playing with her, reading her stories, teaching her to walk and talk. Ivy was an angel, calm, intelligent, affectionate, until we find a nanny stretched over 2 years. Every time I cautiously wondered if it was time to look for a kindergarten, Ruth made excuses. Kindergartens aren't very good now, she said. Lots of sick kids, inattentive teachers. Ivy is developing so well with her grandmother. When her granddaughter was 2, Ruth finally put her in a private kindergarten. Expensive, elite, with English and music classes. The fees are expensive, her daughter complained at a family dinner. $2,000 a month. But what can you do? A good education costs money. A month later, she casually mentioned that the family budget is cracking at the seams. Lionel's trying, of course, but the mortgage eats up half his paycheck. Then there's the car, insurance, utilities, plus daycare for Ivy. Maybe we could find a cheaper daycare center. I suggested it. Mom, come on. How can you save money on a child? Ruth was outraged. Ivy deserves the best. Of course she does. But why should the best be paid for by the grandparents? Ruth didn't ask for it directly. She was just complaining about financial difficulties until I offered to help. Maybe we could help a little, I finally said. Oh, Mom, that would be wonderful. Ruth was so happy. $1,000 a month would be enough, or $800, whatever you want. So I started paying extra for my granddaughter's daycare, then the swimming lessons, then art classes. Each time Ruth saw it as a necessity for the child's development. Then 3 years ago, Edgar died. The heart attack came on suddenly, in the night. I woke up and realized he wasn't breathing. The ambulance came quickly, but it was too late. 40 years together ended in 1 second. Ruth came the next day. She hugged me, cried, said all the right things about what a wonderful man Daddy was. But a week after the funeral, she started talking about practical things. Mom, have you thought about the will? What will? I didn't understand. Well, your will. At your age, it's important to think ahead. At my age, I was 67 at the time, and I felt quite normal. Not yet, I said. Mom, let's be realistic, Ruth insisted. Anything can happen, and Ivy will be going to university soon. Education is very expensive now. Ivy was 16 then. University was still 2 years away. But Ruth was already planning how to spend my inheritance. I didn't think much of it at the time. I thought my daughter was just worried about the future. But now I realize she wasn't worried about my future, she was worried about hers. In the morning, I woke up with a feeling that something had changed. Not in the house, not in the weather outside the window, but in me. Yesterday's conversation with Ruth had removed a film from my eyes. For the first time in years, I could see the situation clearly, without trying to make excuses for my daughter or accusing myself of being overly sensitive. I got up, showered, dressed in a strict gray suit, and ate a breakfast of oatmeal with raisins. An ordinary morning after an extraordinary evening. The hallway mirror reflected the calm face of a 70-year-old woman who had made an important decision. At 9 in the morning, I called the law firm of Harrison and Associates on Main Street. Mr. Harrison had handled our affairs for 20 years, handling the purchase of the house, drafting Edgar's will, helping with the paperwork after his death. Good morning, this is Clemmy Rickson, I said to the receptionist. I need to see Mr. Harrison about the will. Just a moment, Mrs. Rickson. A few seconds later, Harrison himself came to the phone. Clemmy, how are you? I hope you're all right. I'm fine, Gerald. I need to make some changes to my will. Can we meet today? Sure. I have a window at 11 hours in the morning. Will that work? That's fine. I'll be there at 11. I hung up the phone and felt strangely relieved. The decision had been made, and now all I had to do was formalize it. I had 2 hours before the notary. I walked around the house, mentally evaluating the property. A 3-story house on Oakland Avenue in a nice neighborhood. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, large kitchen, living room with fireplace, basement, and garage. Edgar had bought this house in the 80s when prices were reasonable. It was worth much more now. Furniture, dishes, books, paintings, all the stuff that accumulates over 40 years of married life. A bank account with the rest of our savings. A small stock portfolio that Edgar bought for retirement. All in all, not a bad fortune for a teaching family. Ruth was always interested in these details. After Edgar died, she had several conversations about the value of the house, about our savings, about how to manage assets properly in old age. Mom, maybe we should sell the house, she'd say. It's too big for one person. Buy a smaller apartment, and with the difference you'll live comfortably. Where would I buy a smaller place? You could consider a nursing home. A good one, of course. You'd get medical care and socialization with your peers. A nursing home. At 67, Ruth was already planning on putting me in one. I'm not ready for that kind of change yet, I said. Well, it's not urgent, I agreed. You just have to think it through. Think it through. Plan my old age so that she would be comfortable. At 11:30, I got into my old Toyota and drove downtown. Harrison's office was in a beautiful 19th century brick building, a former bank. High ceilings, wood paneling on the walls, the smell of leather and old paper. The receptionist, a milady in her 50s with neat hair, greeted me with a smile. Mrs. Rickson, Mr. Harrison is expecting you. Come in, please. Gerald Harrison was the same age as Edgar, a short, overweight man with a graying beard and kind eyes behind gold-rimmed glasses. He stood up from the massive oak desk and extended his hand to me. Clemmy, how nice to see you. Please sit down. Coffee? Tea? Nothing, thank you. So, you want to make changes to the will? What kind of changes? I took a deep breath. Saying it out loud was harder than I thought. I want to disinherit my daughter. Harrison raised his eyebrows. but he didn't seem surprised. He must have seen a lot of things in his 20 years of practice. I see. Can you explain the reasons? It'll help me get the paperwork right. My daughter and I have a complicated relationship, a difficult relationship. I no longer feel it's right to leave her an inheritance. And the granddaughter? Ivy, if I remember correctly? I want to leave everything to Ivy, but on one condition. What condition? She can't inherit until she's 25, at the earliest. Harrison nodded and pulled out a notebook. That makes sense. And who will administer the inheritance until then? That was a good question. Ruth was definitely not a good fit. She would find a way to spend the money on her granddaughter's needs. Lionel seemed an honest man, but he was Ruth's husband and would act in his wife's best interests. Could we appoint a bank or a trust? Sure, that's even better. We appoint a bank trust to manage the funds for Ivy's benefit until she's 25. What if she wants to go to university or needs money for medical treatment? Exceptions can be made. The trust would be able to pay for education, medical expenses, but only on Ivy's own application, not her parents'. That was exactly what I needed. The granddaughter would be educated and helped if necessary, but Ruth wouldn't be able to use the money for her own purposes. What about the house? Harrison asked. Would you want to leave it to Ivy too? I thought. The house was big and expensive to keep. A young girl wouldn't need it. Sell the house. Add the money to the main inheritance. And while I'm alive, I live in it. That makes sense. All of your property goes into a trust for Ivy Chesterton to be received at age 25. Until that age, the trust can only spend it on education and medical needs on the heiress's own application. Exactly as follows. Harrison wrote down the main points and looked up. Clemmy, I have to ask, are you sure about your decision? Completely disinheriting your daughter is a big step. I looked out the window. Outside was ordinary fall life. People hurrying about their business, cars driving in unknown directions, dogs walking with their owners. A simple, straightforward life where people don't betray each other for a vacation in Mexico. I'm sure, I said firmly. Ruth had made her choice. Now I'm making mine. Are you going to let her know of any changes? Not yet. Maybe later. Okay. Then let's get the paperwork drawn up. I'll need a few days to prepare. The will be ready by Friday. Couldn't it be sooner? I asked. I want to close this matter as soon as possible. Harrison smiled. I understand. I'll have it done by tomorrow night. You can come back Thursday afternoon for the signing. Thank you. We went over the details, and I left the office with a sense of accomplishment. Not duty to my family, but duty to myself. On my way home, I stopped at the grocery store. I bought groceries just for myself, a small piece of fish, vegetables for 2 days, yogurt, bread. It was strange not to think of someone needing a favorite cookie or a special kind of tea. Mrs. Rickson? An acquaintance called out to me. It was Susan Mitchell, the mother of Ruth's former classmate. How are you? How's your daughter? She's fine, thank you, I replied. Ruth is vacationing with her family in Mexico. Oh, that's wonderful. You didn't go with them? No, I prefer a vacation at home. Susan nodded understandingly. Of course, at our age, traveling long distances is tiring. It's good that young people can afford such trips. Yes, it's good. It's especially good to afford traveling on the day of my mother's 70th birthday, who had been preparing for the holiday since 5 in the morning. At home, I laid out my shopping and made myself a simple lunch. Steamed fish, vegetable salad, tea with the cookies Vera had brought yesterday. I ate slowly, enjoying the peace and quiet. After lunch, Vera called. Clemmy, how are you? How are you feeling after yesterday? Surprisingly, but good, I admitted. I went to the notary today. Oh, what did they decide? I changed my will. Ruth is no longer the heir. There was silence on the phone. Really? Vera finally asked. Absolutely serious. Ivy left everything to Ivy, but she won't inherit until she's 25. A wise decision, Vera said after a pause. How does it feel? Relieved, like a heavy weight has been lifted off my shoulders. That's understandable, and you don't regret it? No, I answered without hesitation. No regrets at all. And it was true. No regrets, no doubts. Only the feeling that the decision I had made was right. After talking to Vera, I sat down in Edgar's favorite chair by the window and picked up a book. The detective I'd been putting off for a month. I hadn't had time. Now it was. Rain drizzled outside the window, logs crackled in the fireplace, and the clock ticked softly in the hallway. It was an ordinary fall evening in an empty house, but somehow this house didn't seem empty anymore. It was just quiet. I read and thought about tomorrow, when I would be signing new papers, about how my life would change when I stopped waiting for calls from my ungrateful daughter and adjusting my plans to her whims. At 8 p.m., the phone rang. Ruth's number popped up on the screen. I stared at the blinking screen for a long time, then pressed the reject button. For the first time in years, I didn't talk to my daughter simply because I didn't want to. And it was the right thing to do, too. A week after my visit to the notary, I woke up with an unusual feeling. Not anxiety or sadness, as I'd been feeling for the past few years, but a sense of anticipation, as if something interesting was ahead. A strange feeling for a 70-year-old woman, accustomed to a measured life. The will was signed 3 days ago. Harrison had done the paperwork quickly and neatly. When I signed the last page, I felt physically relieved, as if I had been freed from invisible chains. The documents will be kept in our safe, the notary said, putting the folder in the desk drawer. You can take the copy with you. I took the copy of the will and put it in my purse. 20 pages of legal text that completely changed my future and Ruth's future. On the way home, I stopped at the post office to mail a package to a distant relative in Ohio and noticed an ad on the board. Computer literacy courses for seniors. Classes Tuesdays and Thursdays at the library. First class is free. I scribbled the phone number into my notebook. I'd been thinking about computer courses for a long time. Edgar had bought a computer before he died, but I'd never learned how to use it properly. I only knew how to turn it on, check my email, and occasionally look things up on the internet. Ruth always said it was too late for technology at my age. Mom, why do you need this? She wondered. You have a phone. You have a TV. What else do you need? But I was curious. I saw Ivy finding information quickly and easily, communicating with friends, even buying something online. I wanted to see how it worked. At home, I immediately called the number listed. Dagsboro Public Library, a young female voice answered. Hi, I'm interested in computer classes for seniors. Oh, that's great. My name is Linda and I teach the course. What's your name? Clemmy Rickson. Nice to meet you, Mrs. Rickson. Have you ever worked with computers before? Not much. I know how to turn it on and check my email. Nothing else. That's great. This is exactly the kind of person these courses are designed for. We have a very friendly atmosphere. No one rushes anyone. The next class is Tuesday at 10 a.m. Will you come? I'll be there. I wrote down the address and hung up. Tuesday, tomorrow then. It was exciting to think about being a student again at 70. I spent the rest of the day tidying up the house, not because it was messy, but because I wanted to do something concrete, tangible. I went through the bedroom closet and found a few dresses I'd bought but hardly worn, too brightly colored or dressy for the everyday life of a retired woman, it seemed to me. One dress in particular caught my eye, turquoise with three-quarter sleeves and a dainty collar. I bought it 2 years ago for a friend's birthday party, but at the last moment I changed my mind and wore an ordinary gray suit. Then it seemed that the turquoise dress was too youthful. I took the dress out of the closet and tried it on in front of the mirror. The color refreshed my face, and the cut hid the flaws in my figure. Why did I think it didn't fit me? Was it just because Ruth had once said that women over 60 should wear quiet colors? Mom, you're not a young girl, my daughter said as I showed her my new purchases. Why do you need these bright colors? It looks ridiculous. Ridiculous. I believed her and hid the dress away. But now, looking at my reflection, I didn't see anything ridiculous. Just a woman who wants to look good. In the evening, Vera came in with a rhubarb pie. I baked a lot of it. I can't eat it alone, she said, putting the mold on the kitchen table. How are you? How are you feeling? I'm in a great mood, I said, cutting the pie. I'm taking a computer course tomorrow. Really? Vera raised her eyebrows. At our age? What's the big deal? It's never too late to learn. Of course, the neighbor hastily agreed. It's just amazing. Where are the courses? At the library. There's a special program for the elderly. We sat down to drink tea and cake. It was getting dark outside the window, and the house was warm and cozy. Clemmy, said Vera, gently touching my arm, you've changed? In what way? I don't know how to explain it. You've become more alive. You used to be always a little sad, especially after Edgar died. Now you have a sparkle in your eyes. I thought about it. Something's really changed, not just because of the will, although that was important too. It was just that, for the first time in years, I was living for myself instead of waiting for my ungrateful daughter to call and visit. Maybe I finally realized that life goes on, I said. Have you heard from Ruth? She called a couple times. I didn't answer. How is that? Is it hard not answering? Surprisingly not. I used to grab the phone the first time it rang, afraid I'd miss something important. But now I realize I shouldn't expect anything important from her. Vera nodded. You know, I've got news too. I signed up for the gardening club at the church. You did? I didn't want to before. I thought it was too early to go to clubs. Then I realized, when would I do it if not now? We're 70 years old. We don't have much time to think about it. We laughed, two elderly women who decided not to give up and try something new. I also want to go to my sister's place in Colorado, Vera continued. She has been calling for 5 years, but I kept putting it off. I told myself, expensive, far away, troublesome. But in fact, I was just afraid. Afraid of what? The unknown, of change, that I couldn't handle the trip alone. And now you're not afraid? I'm afraid, but I want to try. I'll buy a plane ticket and go. Worst case scenario, I get home early. I liked the way Vera spoke with determination. We had both changed in the last week, becoming bolder and more active. The next morning, I woke up early, with the excitement of a first grader before the first day of school. I put on the turquoise dress I'd tried on yesterday, did my hair neatly, and even put lipstick on my lips. It had been a long time since she'd dressed up just for herself. The library was in the center of town, in an old red brick building. I arrived 15 minutes before classes started and stood at the entrance for a while, gathering my wits. What if I was the least capable of the group? What if I didn't understand the explanations? What if the other students laughed at my mistakes? Nonsense, I told myself sternly. Everyone has learned at some point, and you can too. There were 8 desks with monitors and keyboards in the library's computer lab. There were 5 people already seated, 3 women about my age and 2 older men. Everyone looked a little confused, and so did I. Welcome. A young woman in her 30s greeted us with a friendly smile. My name is Linda Morrison, and I will take you into the wonderful world of computer technology. Linda proved to be a patient and understanding teacher. She took her time, repeated explanations as many times as she wanted, and never criticized anyone for being slow or making mistakes. Today we are learning the basics, she said, turning on the projector. How a computer works, what the internet is, how to use email safely. The first lesson lasted 2 hours, but it flew by. I learned a lot about browsers, search engines, social networks. It turned out that with the help of a computer, you can not only search for information, but also order groceries, buy tickets, and communicate with people all over the world. Is it possible to find old friends? Asked one of the students, Dorothy. Of course, rejoiced Linda. There are special sites for finding classmates and coworkers. Would you like to try it? For the next half an hour, we searched for our acquaintances from the past. Dorothy found a childhood friend who had moved to California 40 years ago. A man named Frank found pictures of his army unit from the Vietnam War. I tried to find my high school friend Patricia Coleman. We were friends through high school, then went off to different colleges and lost touch. I typed her name into the search box, and a few seconds later, I saw a familiar face on the screen. Patricia Coleman, Miami, Florida, I read aloud. That's her. Write her a message, Linda suggested. I was sure she'd be glad to hear from an old friend. I thought about what to write for a few minutes, then typed a short message. Hi, Patty. This is Clemmy Rickson from Dagsboro. I found you on the internet, and I'm so glad I did. How are you doing? Write if you hear from me. I sent the message and felt a thrill. I wondered if Patricia would respond. Would she remember me after all these years? After class, I went to the cafe across from the library. I ordered a coffee and cake and sat by the window, watching the passers-by. New terms kept popping into my head. Browser, link, site, account. Not so long ago, they were obscure words, but now I was beginning to understand what they meant. The waitress, a young girl in her 20s, noticed my notebook. Studying computers? She asked in a friendly manner. Yes, I'm taking a course for retired people. That's great. My grandmother has also recently mastered the internet. Now she sends me funny pictures and recipes all the time. How old is she? 82. She says the only thing she regrets is that she didn't start learning sooner. 82 years old. If this woman can master the computer at that age, then I, 70 years old, can do it. At home, the first thing I did was check my email. Among the advertising letters was one from an unfamiliar address. I opened it and gasped. Clemmy, I can't believe it. Of course I remember you. It's been so long. I've lived in Florida for 30 years, have 2 children and 4 grandchildren. How are you doing? I'd love to talk to you. My phone? Patricia answered, and so quickly. I reread the letter several times, smiling. I'll call her tomorrow. Vera came in the evening, full of enthusiasm. How was the course? Wonderful. I learned so many new things. I also found a school friend, with whom we haven't spoken for half a century. Really? Oh my gosh. And I went to the gardening club today. Such nice people, so many interesting ideas. We agreed to go to the botanical gardens this weekend. We sat in the kitchen drinking tea and sharing our impressions like schoolgirls after a field trip. You know, Clemmy, said Vera, we were wasting our time. How many interesting things we could have tried earlier. Better late than never, I replied. The main thing is that we started. Have you heard from your daughter? She called this afternoon. She didn't answer again. How do you feel? Free, I said after a short pause. Before, I was always on guard, waiting for her calls, preparing myself for the next request for help. Now I'm living my life. And it's the right thing to do. Yeah, it was right. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like the mother of an ungrateful daughter, but just a woman named Clemmy with many more interesting days ahead of her. Ruth returned from Mexico a week after my first computer class. I didn't hear about it from her, but from a social networking site that Linda had taught us to check out during the second class. My daughter posted pictures from the beach, tanned, smiling, in a bright swimsuit against the turquoise sea. Best vacation ever. Mexico, you are forever in my heart, she wrote under a snapshot of the whole family posing by the hotel pool. Even Ivy looked content, although in some of the photos I noticed some thoughtfulness in her eyes. I flipped through the photos over a cup of morning coffee and marveled at my own calmness. A month ago, these pictures of a happy family at a resort on my 70th birthday would have caused me pain and tears. Now I was simply stating a fact. They had had a good vacation for my money, which I had given them all these years. Ruth called on Wednesday evening as I was preparing for another class at the library. I was just repeating my homework. Linda had asked everyone to try to find a recipe for their favorite dish on the internet. Mom, hi. My daughter's voice sounded cheerful and carefree. How are you? Hello, Ruth. I'm fine. We got back yesterday. It was such a great vacation. Sea, sun, great food. Lionel even learned to snorkel. Good for you. How about you? Did you miss me? Not bored. That's an interesting question. I signed up for computer courses, reconnected with an old friend, started reading books I didn't have time for before, made friends with my roommates. Is that called boredom? No, not bored. I was busy. Busy doing what? Ruth sounded a little surprised. I guess she didn't know what an elderly mother could do alone. I'm taking a computer course at the library. Really? Ruth laughed, but it didn't sound very pleasant. Mom, why would you do that at your age? At your age, there's that phrase again. It's like when you're 70, your life is over, and all you can do is sit in a chair and wait to die. Why not? I asked calmly. I'm interested. Well, I don't know. It's so difficult for the elderly. What if you can't do it? You'd be upset. I'm doing pretty well so far. I've already learned how to use search engines and email. Well, if you like it. Ruth obviously didn't know what to say to that. Listen, we were going to come up this weekend, tell you about our vacation, show you pictures. I have classes on Saturday, I lied. In fact, there were no classes on Saturday, but I didn't want to meet my daughter. I wasn't ready to look her in the eye and pretend that nothing had changed. What about Sunday? Sunday, I'm going to the botanical gardens with a friend. It was true. Vera had signed up for the gardening club and invited me on their tour. What friend? Ruth sounded a little wary. Vera Ellsworth. You know her. She lives across the street. Oh, that old lady. All right, next weekend then. The old lady. Vera was only 3 years younger than me, but to Ruth we were all just old ladies with no lives or interests of our own. We'll see, I said uncertainly. Mom, what's the matter with you? Ruth suddenly asked. You sound strange. It's not weird. It's just a normal voice. No, it's not. You're kind of, distant. Do you have a cold? I don't have a cold. I'm just tired, studying for class tomorrow. What class? That computer class I was just telling you about. Oh, yes. Ruth was quiet. Well, I'll leave you to it. I'll see you this weekend. Goodbye. I hung up the phone and realized that my daughter had sensed the change in my attitude, but couldn't explain it. Before, I would have rushed to ask about the vacation, admire their tan, sympathize with the fatigue after the flight. Now I answered politely but without enthusiasm. The next day at the course, Linda showed us how to use the video link. We learned how to turn on the camera, adjust the sound, and communicate using a program whose name I still have trouble remembering. It is very convenient for communicating with relatives who live far away, the teacher explained. You can not only hear but also see the person you are talking to. Frank, one of my classmates, suddenly became lively. Can I contact my son in Germany? Of course, if he also has this program installed. He's a programmer. He has everything installed. Frank laughed. He'll be so happy when I call him via video link. I felt a little sad. Frank had a warm relationship with his son, who worked in Berlin. They communicated regularly. The son sent pictures of his grandchildren and planned to come visit at Christmas. And I had a daughter who flew out on vacation on my 70th birthday. After class, I stopped by a bookstore I'd been meaning to visit for a long time. It was a small, cozy store on Oak Street that smelled like new books and coffee. The owner, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, helped me choose several novels and a collection of poems. "Do you read often?" she asked me as she packed my purchases. I used to read a lot, but in recent years, I'd given up. I didn't have enough time. But now you have time? Yes, I do. My children are grown up. My granddaughter is grown up. I can finally live for myself. "It's wonderful," smiled saleswoman. "We have a book club every Wednesday. We gather in a small group, discuss what we've read, drink tea. If you're interested, join us. Book club." Another opportunity to spend time with interesting people. I made a note of the meeting times and promised to think about it. On Friday, Ruth called again. "Mom, how are you doing? How was your course?" "It was good. We studied video communication." "Wow, you're becoming quite the advanced user," she said with condescension in her voice. "We're thinking about coming tomorrow. Or should we do it on Sunday? I have plans this weekend." "Again with that course?" "I'm seeing Patricia on Saturday. Remember I told you about the high school friend I found on the internet?" "Oh, yeah. Where are you meeting her?" She's visiting from Miami. She's renting a hotel room. We're going to eat at a restaurant." It was true. Patricia was a remarkably energetic woman despite her 72 years. We'd been emailing for a week, and she suggested we meet in person. "I see," Ruth said quietly. "What about Sunday?" "Sunday, I'm going with Vera to the botanical gardens. Her gardening club is organizing a tour." "Mom, you've become very busy," her daughter said with slight irritation. "You used to have time for your family." "I used to." "Yes, I used to cancel all my plans when Ruth called to say she wanted to come over, sitting at home waiting, cooking dinners that got cold because the family was late or didn't show up at all." "I still have time for my family now," I replied calmly. "But now I plan ahead instead of keeping it in reserve just in case." Ruth hadn't expected that answer. "Well, I'll see you next weekend then." "Okay, but we'd better make arrangements." "Sure, Mom. I'll call during the week." After the conversation, I sat in my favorite chair by the window with a new book, a novel about a woman who, at 60, decides to make a radical change in her life. A very timely topic. Saturday's meeting with Patricia exceeded all expectations. We recognized each other immediately, despite the passing of half a century. The same laughter, the same lively eyes, the same energy that attracted classmates in high school. "Clemmy," she exclaimed, hugging me in the hotel lobby. "You haven't changed at all. You look beautiful, too." We had lunch in the hotel restaurant, and the conversation didn't stop for a minute. Patricia talked about her life in Florida, her work as a real estate agent, her 2 marriages and divorces, her children and grandchildren. "How about you?" she asked. "Tell me about your life." I told her about my marriage to Edgar, my daughter, my granddaughter. I didn't mention the recent birthday events. It was too personal and painful for a first meeting. "So, you've been a widow for 3 years?" Patricia nodded sympathetically. "That's hard. How's your daughter? Does she help?" "Ruth has her own life. She has a family, a job. We don't see each other very often." "I understand. Kids are kids. What do you do? Any hobbies?" I told her about computer courses and my plans to join a book club. Patricia listened with interest. "That's great. I've taken up yoga. Can you imagine at 72 years old, I get into such poses, which in my youth and never dreamed of. I also go to the theater studio for the elderly. Last month they played Chekhov's Three Sisters." "Really? On stage?" "Of course. It's a small auditorium, but it was a real stage. It was scary and delightful at the same time. You should try it. We talked into the evening. Patricia proved to be a treasure trove of ideas for an active life in old age. Traveling, hobbies, volunteering, creative work. She had tried everything and wasn't about to stop. You know, Clemmy, she said before parting, I think you're too focused on your family. Your daughter is grown up. Your granddaughter will soon be on her own. It's time to live for yourself. I'm getting there. That's good. A lot of women our age get depressed when the kids get distant. They sit at home and wait for the phone to ring. That's what I used to do. I used to sit and wait. Sunday's trip to the botanical garden with the gardening club was interesting too. Vera introduced me to the other members, 5 men and women between the ages of 60 and 75, all enthusiastic, knowledgeable, ready to share their experience. Do you have a garden? Margaret, an energetic woman in her 70s, asked me. A small plot behind the house. My husband used to do it, but after he died, I gave it up. Only weeds grow. What a pity. We should definitely tidy it up. Gardening is the best cure for all sorrows. But I don't know anything about plants. Learn. We'll help you. We have a great gardening library, and everyone is willing to counsel beginners. As I walked back home, I thought about how my life has changed in the last 2 weeks. New people, new hobbies, new plans, and no waiting for calls from my daughter, no trying to guess her moods and desires. That evening, Ruth called again. Mom, how are you doing? How was your weekend? It was great. I met a friend from Miami, went to the botanical gardens. You've been busy. I could hear the confusion in her daughter's voice. We were supposed to come next weekend, Saturday afternoon. Saturday won't work. I have my first book club class. What book club? The bookstore on Oak Street. We're going to talk about what we've read. Mom, what's going on with you? Ruth asked me abruptly. You've become kind of, I don't know, aloof. You used to be always happy when we wanted to come over. Now you're always busy. I used to. There's that word again. Yes, I used to get excited and drop all my plans for my family, and family would come when they wanted, be late when they wanted, and cancel when they wanted. I've developed interests, I replied calmly. That's normal. But we're a family. We're more important than courses and clubs. Of course we are. But now I have to plan ahead. Ruth paused for a moment, obviously thinking about what I was saying. All right, she said at last. Then tell me when it's convenient for you. I'm free Sunday afternoon. All right, we'll come on Sunday. What time? 2 o'clock in the afternoon. It's a deal. Bye, Mom. I hung up the phone and smiled. For the first time in my life, my daughter was adjusting to my plans instead of the other way around. A small but important victory. Sunday afternoon at 2 o'clock, I heard the sound of a car in the driveway. I looked out the window and saw Lionel's familiar silver Honda. Ruth and Ivy got out of the car. Lionel wasn't there. Apparently, he had something to do. I opened the door while they were still climbing the porch steps. Ruth looked rested and tanned. White jeans, brightly colored blouse, fancy sunglasses on her head. Ivy was dressed more modestly dark slacks, a simple gray sweater, her hair in a ponytail. Hi, Mom. Ruth kissed me on the cheek. How are you? Hi, I said, hugging my granddaughter. Ivy, honey, how are you? I'm fine, Grandma Clemmy. She smiled, but it seemed a little strained. We went into the living room. I noticed that Ruth was looking around the house curiously, as if she were looking for changes. You haven't changed a thing, she said, sitting down on the couch. It's just as it was. What should have changed? I don't know. You're so active now. I thought maybe you were renovating or rearranging the furniture. Ivy sat next to her mother and listened to our conversation in silence. There was a look of concern in her eyes. Being active doesn't necessarily mean rearranging the furniture, I said. Would you like some tea? Coffee? Tea, please, Ivy said. Coffee for me, Ruth added. Tell me about your courses. How's it going? I went into the kitchen to put the kettle on and heard Ruth talking quietly to her daughter. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was serious, even stern. Ivy's answers were monosyllabic. What are you two whispering about? I asked, coming back into the living room. Just discussing Ivy's studies, Ruth said casually. She's having trouble with one subject. Ivy glanced quickly at her mother, but said nothing. What subject? I asked. Economics, she said shortly. It's a difficult program, but you will cope. You're a smart girl. Of course she can do it, Ruth interjected. You just have to study more, not waste time on nonsense. There's that stern tone again. I brought tea and coffee and put cookies and sliced cake on the table. Tell me about your vacation, I suggested. How was it? Wonderful. Ruth cheered up. The hotel was so nice, the food was wonderful, and the beach was gorgeous. We went swimming, sunbathing, and sightseeing every day. She took out her phone and started showing pictures. I listened politely to the comments, but noticed that Ivy was participating in the story reluctantly. She answered her mother's questions about what she liked best, briefly and without enthusiasm. And you, Ivy, how did you rest? I asked her directly. Not bad. She shrugged her shoulders. It was very hot. I don't like heat. But the sea was as warm as milk, Ruth continued. And it was so clear, and the fish were beautiful yellow, blue, striped. Mommy, you told me about it, Ivy said quietly. So what? Grandmother is interested. But it wasn't the description of the fish, not the description of the fish, but the strange behavior of my granddaughter. The usually cheerful and outgoing Ivy seemed depressed today. She sat with her eyes down and hardly touched her tea. Ivy, honey, how are things at the university? I asked. Do you like studying? Yes, I like it. The girl raised her head and smiled sincerely for the first time during the whole visit, especially literature and history, and math and economics are more difficult. That's normal. Everyone has their own inclinations. Grandma Clemmy, what kind of courses are you taking? Ivy asked, clearly wanting to change the subject. Computer classes at the library. I'm learning how to use the internet, email. It's very interesting. Really? What do you already know how to do? Searching for information, video chatting, even found my high school friend on a social networking site. That's great. Ivy's finally getting really excited. What social network? I named the platform and my granddaughter nodded. I have an account there too. Why don't we friend each other? Sure, just show me how to do it. Ivy, don't distract your grandmother from a serious conversation, said Ruth. It's hard enough for her as it is. Why is it difficult? I objected. On the contrary, it's very exciting. Mom, let's be realistic. It's hard to learn new technology at your age. Again, at your age. I looked at my daughter, a beautiful, cold face that was condescending. Ruth honestly thought that at 70, all you could do was sit at home and knit socks. Age has nothing to do with it, Ivy said abruptly. There's a math professor at our university who's 85, and he has a blog on the internet. He posts articles every day. That's the exception, Ruth said. Not everyone is so capable. Grandma's capable too, the granddaughter said stubbornly. There was a spark of tension between mother and daughter. I sensed that there was some conflict between them that I didn't know about. Okay, let's not argue, I said conciliatorily. Ivy, will you show me how to add friends? Sure, can I see your computer? We went into Edgar's office where there was an old computer. Ivy quickly turned it on and went online. You have to sign up for a social networking site first, she explained. Let's get you an account. Ruth stayed in the living room with her lips pressed together. I guess she didn't like her daughter helping me so much with the computer. Grandma, Ivy said quietly as we filled out the registration form. Can I talk to you alone? Of course, dear. What's wrong? I'll tell you later. When Mommy can't hear. We finished registering and went back to the living room. Ruth was leafing through a magazine on the coffee table. Finished with the computer stuff? She asked with a little irritation. Yes, I have a social networking account now, I replied. Great. Now let's talk about serious stuff. What serious stuff? Your health, how you're coping alone in this big house. Lionel and I are worried. They are. I wonder when they started worrying. When they flew to Mexico on my 70th birthday. My health's fine. I'm doing okay with the house, too. But you're in your 70s. You can have problems at that age. And if something happens, who's going to help you? I have neighbors, I have a phone, and I'm not going to die anytime soon. Mom, that's not what I meant, Ruth said hastily. We just thought maybe we should look at some options. There are very good homes for the elderly, with medical care, organized recreational activities, homes for the elderly. There it is again. I don't want to move anywhere. I'm comfortable here. But this house is too big for one person. I think I should sell it and buy a small apartment or move to a special place. Ruth, I'm 70 years old, not 90, and I'm still going strong. Moving is out of the question. All right, said the daughter conciliatingly. Not now, so in the future. You just have to think it over beforehand. Ivy sat silently and listened attentively to our conversation. Her eyes showed surprise and something else, maybe disappointment in her mother. Grandma, can I stay with you tonight? She suddenly asked. I only have evening classes tomorrow. Of course, dear. I'm always happy to. But you have an economics exam tomorrow, Ruth objected. The exam is the day after tomorrow. Tomorrow's just a counseling session. Then you'd better go home and study. Mom, I'm ready, and I want to be with Grandma. There was tension between mother and daughter again. Ruth obviously didn't want to leave Ivy with me, but she couldn't think of a good reason. All right, she finally agreed, but make sure you come home tomorrow night. I will. Ruth started to leave. She kissed me on the cheek again and told Ivy not to tire her grandmother out. We're not running a marathon, she joked. We're just going to talk. Look, Ruth said sternly, and study for the exam. When the door closed behind my daughter, I was relieved. The atmosphere in the house was at once lighter and calmer. Ivy, honey, what did you want to talk about? I asked when we were alone. Grandma, the girl sat down next to me on the couch. I have something to tell you about your birthday. My heart jumped. What about my birthday? I knew we weren't coming. My mom told me a week before we left, and we bought the tickets even earlier. I see. I was ashamed. I wanted to stay, to say I was sick or had exams, but Mom insisted that the family should be together. Why didn't you write to me then? You didn't warn me? Mom forbade it. She said you'd get upset and talk them out of going. And the vouchers were already paid for, and there was no refund. Ivy spoke quietly, looking down at the floor. I could see how hard it was for her to admit to the deception. Grandma, please forgive me. I was terribly ashamed. I thought about you every day, imagined you preparing for the holiday, waiting for us. Honey, it's not your fault, I said, hugging my granddaughter. You didn't make the decision. But I could have insisted. I could have said I wouldn't go. At 19, it's hard to stand up to your parents. And Mom said some strange things, Ivy continued, that you were too clingy, that you were always demanding attention, that we needed a break from family obligations. Clingy, demanding attention. Family obligations is what Ruth calls socializing with me. Grandma, is that true? Are you really clingy? What do you think? I don't think so. You never forced us to come, never called every day, never made a scene if we canceled. On the contrary, you've always been understanding and forgiving. So I'm not clingy. Why does your mom say that? That's a good question. Why does a daughter make a caring mother seem pushy and demanding? Maybe because it makes it easier to justify her own indifference. You know, Ivy, I said after a pause, sometimes people blame others for things that are their own fault. Your mom doesn't feel comfortable admitting that she's being mean to me, so she's looking for excuses. So you think your mom treats you badly? A direct question required a direct answer. I decided to speak frankly with my granddaughter. She's old enough to understand the complexities of family relationships. Yes, Ivy, I do. Why didn't you ever tell her about this? I have, but she won't listen. To her, I'm just an old mother who should be grateful for any attention. Ivy was silent as she thought about what I said. Grandma, what's going to happen now? How will you two communicate? I don't know yet. We'll see. What if she apologizes? Apologize for what? Ruth doesn't feel guilty. A vacation is more important to her than her mother's birthday, and that's fine. But it's wrong. Of course it's wrong. But your mother doesn't think so. Ivy got up and walked across the room. You know, Grandma, sometimes I don't understand Mom. She can be kind and caring, but only when it benefits her. And if her interests don't coincide with other people's, she gets cold. You make a good point, and I don't like it. I don't want to be the same. You won't be the same, I said with conviction. You have a good heart, I can tell. Where did Mom get her temper from? You're normal. Grandpa Edgar was a good man, too. I don't know, honey. Sometimes children are born with personality traits that don't depend on their upbringing. We talked late into the evening. Ivy talked about her plans, about how she wanted to work with children, maybe become a teacher or a psychologist. I shared memories of my youth, how I met my grandfather, how happy I was when Ruth was born. Grandma, my granddaughter said before she went to bed, I'll come visit you more often, alone, without Mommy. I'll be very happy. And I want to help you with your computer. We can video chat when I'm at university. That's a great idea. Also, Ivy didn't say anything. I'm sorry about your mom, if you can. I know what she did was wrong, but she's still your daughter. We'll see, honey. We'll see. The call from Ruth came on Thursday morning as I was preparing for my next computer class. I had already learned to recognize a particular tone in my daughter's voice, overly cheerful and tense at the same time. It was the tone that usually preceded a request for help. Hey, Mom, how are you? Her voice sounded unnaturally cheerful. Hello, Ruth. I'm fine. Listen, we have a situation, she began, and I braced myself. Remember I told you about the trouble with our car? I didn't. Ruth rarely shared family problems unless they required my financial involvement. I don't remember much. What's wrong with the car? Well, the engine's acting up. The gearbox is making strange noises. Lionel took it to the service, said it'd cost more to fix than the car's worth. I see. So, what are you planning on doing? Well, buy a new one, of course. We can't do without a car. For me to go to work and Ivy to university. We found a good one, almost a new car, only 2 years old. It's only owned by one person, and it's been well maintained. Ruth spoke quickly, as if she was afraid I'd interrupt her and keep her from talking. But there's a problem, she continued. I don't have enough money for the down payment. They give you a loan, but you have to pay $5,000 at once. And we're having trouble with the budget right now. We're on a very expensive vacation, and Ivy needs something at the university all the time. I didn't say anything, waiting for her to continue. Ruth paused, waiting for my reaction. Mom, are you listening? I'm listening. So, we've been thinking. I was wondering, maybe you could help us out with that $5,000. We'd pay it back, of course, as soon as the finances work out. The finances will work out. Ruth had promised to repay her debts many times over the years, but never did. Apparently, she didn't think her parents' help was repayable. Ruth, how much is this car worth? I asked. 28,000, but that's a great price for a car like that. Usually a car like this costs more than $30,000. $28,000, almost half of my savings, and that's just for a car they liked. Can't you find something cheaper? Mom, why would you buy an old wreck? Ruth's voice became irritated. We don't want to have to go in for repairs every month. It's better to buy a reliable car once. A reliable car for $28,000, and the $5,000 down payment has to come from my mother. Ruth, I can't help you. There was silence, a long, tense pause. How could you not? The daughter finally asked, and there was genuine surprise in her voice. Exactly. I can't give you $5,000. But why not? You have money. The house is expensive, plus Daddy's savings. I have money, but I don't want to spend it on your car. You don't? Ruth's voice got higher. Mom, what are you talking about? We're a family. It's because we're a family that I don't want to finance your expensive purchases. What expensive purchases? It's a necessity. Without a car, we can't live well. You can buy a used car cheaper, or you can take out an all-inclusive loan with no down payment. Mom, are you crazy? Ruth couldn't hide her anger anymore. A used car means constant breakdowns and expenses, and a loan with no down payment comes with a huge interest rate. That's your problem, not mine. Our problems? Mom, I'm your daughter. Ivy is your granddaughter. How can you say our problems are none of your business? I got up from the kitchen table and walked across the room. I could hear my daughter's heavy breathing through the phone, clearly trying to pull herself together. Ruth, you're adults with 2 paychecks. You can handle your finances on your own. Yeah, of course. And when you need help, who do you run to? The neighbors? If I need help, I'll ask for it, but I won't take it for granted. Take it for granted. Ruth's voice has become quite harsh. Mom, do you know what you're saying? Parents always help their children. It's normal. Parents help their children get back on their feet. But you've been on your feet for a long time. You have a home, a job, an income. It's time for you to solve your own problems. I can't believe it, Ruth exclaimed. What happened to you? You never refused to help us before. Before? There's that word again. I didn't understand a lot of things before. Now I do. What exactly do you understand? That you take my help for granted, that none of you ever said thank you for the $30,000 down payment on the house, for all the years of free babysitting Ivy, for paying for her daycare and tutoring. Mom, we said thank you. No, we didn't. You took it for granted. That's not true. What does that have to do with our current situation? It has everything to do with it. I'm no longer going to fund your wishes. Wishes? Ruth's voice shook with indignation. A car is not a wish, it's a necessity. A car is a necessity, but this particular $28,000 car is your wish. You've become cruel, Ruth said after a pause, and tears came into her voice. I don't know what's gotten into you, but I don't like it. I didn't like it when you went on vacation on my 70th birthday. Again with the birthday. Mom, how many times? We explained that it was an accidental tour, an opportunity we couldn't miss. The opportunity to have a good vacation was more important than my mother's 70th birthday. Now, my ability not to spend money on your car is more important than your plans. It's not the same thing at all. Why are they different? They're both a matter of priorities. Mom, I don't know what's happening to you. Ruth's voice became pleading. You've always been kind, understanding, and now you've become so callous. Callous. I was called callous for refusing to give $5,000 for a car. I didn't become callous. I just stopped being comfortable. Comfortable? What are you talking about? I mean, I used to be willing to help with money, time, effort, and all I got in return was more requests for help. But we love you. You do? Then why did you forget my birthday? We didn't. It was just an unfortunate circumstance. Ruth, stop lying. Ivy told me everything. You bought the tickets in advance and told me at the last minute. Silence again, long and eloquent. All right, Ruth said at last, her voice cold. Let's say we did the wrong thing with the birthday party, but that's no reason to refuse to help us now. Why not? Because one thing has nothing to do with the other. It does to me. Your behavior has shown me your true feelings about me, and I'm drawing conclusions. What conclusions? That I will no longer live for a family that doesn't appreciate me. Doesn't appreciate you? Mom, how can you say that? Of course we appreciate you. No, you don't. I'm just a source of financial aid and free services to you. That's terrible, Ruth exclaimed. I never thought you could be so unfair. And I never thought my daughter could be so selfish. Selfish? Why do you call me that? Because you never think about other people unless it's in your own interest. That's not true. I take care of my family. I work. I raise my daughter. You take care of your family at my expense. When you need money, you think of your mother. When you want to rest, you forget. Mom, why are you twisting everything? We're just asking for help. It's normal. It's okay to ask. It's not normal to demand and resent rejection. I'm not demanding. I'm asking. You demand, and then you're surprised when you get rejected, as if I'm obligated to help you. You do, Ruth blurted out, and then she realized she had said too much. Exactly. You think I'm obliged. I don't. All right, she said, her voice growing cold. I get it. So I can't count on you anymore. I can't. Then we'll reconsider our attitude towards you. That's your right. Don't expect Ivy to visit much. She's got school. She's got her own thing going on. Ivy's old enough to decide who she wants to hang out with. We'll see about that, Ruth said sharply. And anyway, think about it. Maybe you'll change your mind about helping. Before it's too late. I won't. All right. Then you decide how you want to live your life. Alone. My daughter hung up. I looked at the phone and smiled. For the first time in years, Ruth hadn't gotten her way with threats and emotional manipulation. I sat back down at the table and finished my coffee. The conversation with my daughter hadn't upset me as much as it might have a month ago. On the contrary, I felt relieved. I'd finally said what I thought. It's never too late to start over, Vera had once said. The main thing is to have courage. I had a lot of courage now.